to today's live. I thought I'd go live and kind of explain what I'm doing here rather than do it myself in silence in the workshop. I thought it might be interesting for some people out there who want to kind of color match leather edge paint. Maybe they don't have every kind of edge paint under the sun color wise, and they might want to get the basics and mix them themselves. So what I'm going to do here is just give you a demonstration on how I mix colors to kind of match. And what I'm doing today is working on this. This is for a course that I'm producing at the moment on bag design. So anybody out there who wants to get involved in bag design, this is a course for you. So at the moment we have a London tan exterior, and the interior, as you can see here, is kind of an olive green. It is in fact this olive green. It's a lambskin, a pigmented lambskin, and that's the color I've gone with. So to kind of finish the edges, due to the design, a turned edge isn't going to be practical for this. Edge binding would be very difficult to do on tight corners. French binding would be not impossible, but you wouldn't have enough on the corners to do it. So edge paint in this application makes sense. It also can't be burnished because the inside here is chrome tan leather and the exterior is vegetable tan leather. Now there are some kind of workarounds, but it's never quite as pleasing as a proper burnish. So edge paint in this case makes the most sense. So I'm going to color match to get this. So it's a bit kind of like an olive drab, olive green. Technically a true olive is just like a really dark yellow. It's not a green as such, but this is an olive green, so it has a little bit of blue in there. So what I've done here is got some paints that I need to use up actually. This is caramel, so it's representing the yellow component, but it's a bit more of a warm yellow, if you know what I mean. So all we're doing today is just taking a piece of scrap. This is a piece of flank, but it's exactly the same color as the good bit, so I'm going to use that. So I'm going to put a small amount. You don't want to use too much when you're color matching, first of all. And then once you kind of get to grips with the ratios, then you can use a set of small scales like this one. Once you know the ratios of each color, place your little cup on there, and you know this amount of grams of this color, this amount of grams of this color, and so you'll need to record that down. But initially, just to get an idea of what we need to do and how it's made. God, these ones are getting old. I'll start with a little bit of yellow, just a touch, and I'm going to put like a drop of blue and just see where we go with that one. No mushroom colors. No. How you doing, buddy? So I'm just going to put a drop in there, just see how that works. Sometimes you'll be surprised how one color can completely overpower another one. So you've got to watch out for that. So just one drop in there has definitely changed what I'm seeing so far, but not quite enough. And sometimes it can take a lot of experimentation to get the color that you want to, but initially you just want to kind of bung them all in together and see what the outcome is. So let's try 2 drops, 1, 2. See how that works. So I don't think it's going to take very much blue to bring out this green. And once we get that green color, it's not a very dark green. It's kind of a little bit of a light color green, if you know what I mean. It's not the most pleasing look at the moment. But what I can then do is start darkening it with black, which will maintain the green, but just take it down a tone or two. So I think that's enough green at the moment, but it's a little bit too bright, as you can see. So we need to bring that down a little bit. It might take more blue, we'll see. Looks mushy pea green. Making me hungry. Mushy peas, fish and chips. Bit of a northern thing, but I do like it. Let's try two drops of black there and see what that does to it. Not a whole lot, to be honest, so it's going to take a little bit more than that. So blue had more of a profound effect than black, but keep stirring because sometimes it does begin to change. Another way of doing this is getting kind of like a 5mm, 10mm disposable syringes, which I've done before. You can buy them online really cheaply. And then just pull out a measured amount of one edge paint. Obviously, don't double dip, if you know what I mean. Like if you have one for black, have one for blue, one for yellow. And then once you get your ratios, you know exactly how to replicate them. So that's another way of doing it. We're getting a little bit closer. It's starting to darken up now, but I need a few more drops of black. Let's see how we go. And I will say now, don't always perfectly match your edge paint while it's wet. Once you start getting close, what you want to do is just put a little bit down on some leather, the surface, and let it dry. Just a smear, not too thin, because then the color of the leather can go through it and throw you off a little bit. Not too thick so it dries in a few minutes, but not too thin that it's opaque. And then let it dry naturally or with a fan. Don't use heat because that can sometimes change the temperature. That's fooled me before. So just a fan, just a little dry out, and then take a look at it and then objectively go, okay, it's too dark or it's too light or it's not, it needs another drop of blue and another drop of blah, blah, blah. And that's really what you want to do with this. You want to see what it's like when it's dry. And then when you've gotten close, you know how to make it again. Okay, so let's stir that up. Might be too dark. See how it goes. It's difficult to say inside a cup. Keep stirring, keep stirring, keep stirring. At least like 30 seconds of stirring I'd recommend. Okay, so we are getting a little bit closer now, as you can see. So at this stage, once I'm getting close, I then transition to putting a little bit down. And I'm not measuring anything right now. I'm just kind of keeping a memory of what it looks like. And then later on, I can start measuring amounts to get the exact color that I need. And if ever you create some edge paint, obviously I'll need to make a bit more of this for the bag, but you create a certain amount, you put it on, you think it's about right, and then you look at it objectively afterwards and think, it's slightly too bright, it needs to come down. You can always, that's your first layer of edge paint, give it a sanding down, not completely sand it away, make the adjustment to the color, and then do a second layer. And then as you're going along, you can make minor adjustments to each layer until you get it just right. So that's one little trick that you can do. Okay, so let's put a smear on. Right now, it looks a little bit, just a shade too bright. Just a shade too bright. However, that can change. Let's spread that out a little bit more. That can change as it dries. So that's something to be aware of. Yeah. Now what I'm going to do, because obviously it's going to be really boring if I wait here for 20 minutes, I am going to use heat. Try not to use too much. We'll see how that looks. Should take around a minute. But you don't want to let it get too hot. It should be a warm breeze if you have to do this. You can see it's starting to dry on the edges now. The best practice is just to use like a small desk fan like this, which is what I use for drying things sometimes. Do another 20 seconds and then we'll take a look and see how that looks. I just put my fingers down occasionally to make sure it's not getting too hot. If it's too hot for my fingers, the edge paint can darken a little bit and give you false readings. Okay, let's take a look at that. So I think the shade of green is okay. You can kind of see there it's a little bit too bright. So I'm not going to add any more blue to that for now. I'm going to add a few drops of black and just see where we go. Just see how that pans out. So let's give that a little stir up. I'm going to put the lids back on. I have been known to spill them everywhere. Phil's experimenting, and it's nice to see I'm not the only one. Oh yeah, experimenting is essential. That's where all progress happens. So I think I was on the money going for this, which is caramel, yeah, instead of a regular yellow. It brings a warmth to the olive green that skin has. I don't know if you can see that in there, but there's a warmth to it. And I think the shade of green that regular bright yellow, canary yellow would add to that would be a bit bright. Give it a good stir. A few more seconds. And then we'll try again. Guys, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. And don't forget, anybody who's interested in color matching, I did a blog. I can't remember the name of the blog. I've done so many now. On leathercraftmasterclass.com, go to the blog section. And if you scroll down, there is one on color matching and how to match colors for a project and what works and what doesn't and how you go about doing it. Plus, I do link and give a little video description of how to use it. A free, like an online tool where you can kind of put in the color that you want and it will tell you the ratios to go with, and that will give you a ballpark of where to go, and then you can fine tune it from there. And this kind of works for using paints like Angela's paints on leather as well. It's not just leather edge paint. I think this is going to be a little bit closer. So this is number 2. And what I'm going to do actually is mark that. That was number 1. This is number 2. And let's give that a little bit of a blast. Caramel and olive, they do go well together. I'm usually using tan and matching the thread. A good combo. Yeah, I find it's a good combination that works well together as well. There's quite a few that work quite nicely with tan. Let's give this 30 seconds. Again, not letting it get too hot, just kind of using my fingers there. This is a little heat gun that I use for various different things. Melting wax onto thread is a great one actually for this. It's actually, this is made for a type of craft where you draw with an adhesive, and they use these little micro beads of plastic that stick to the adhesive, and then you use this to go around because it's like a precision nozzle, and it melts the plastic so you get an embossed effect. I can't remember what it's called, but that's what it's for. I've never actually done it, but that's what it's designed for. Do another 10-20 seconds, I think. Sometimes I blow the hot air out because it will trip a little switch in there that shuts it out when it gets too hot. There's too much residual heat buildup. Okay, so there's number 2. There's number 2. It's still kind of drying in the middle, so it should lighten up a bit. You can see number 1 is a slightly shade lighter, and it looks like it's difficult because there's a lot of shine on this, that this might be a shade too dark. Might be a shade too dark, but it's a closer match, number 2 there. I'm going to add a few more drops of yellow. It'd be nice to hear about where you learned your very excellent skills in general, not just with edge paint. To be honest, it's mostly over the years. I started out just kind of making stuff for fun. And the local place that I bought leather from when I was living abroad at the time did courses that you could go into their shop and do. And the guy that taught it was a case maker. And I mean, he made all sorts of stuff. It's more of he had more of a Western style. I think he was very much influenced by Al Stolman. Anyway, I did a few sessions with him just to kind of get the idea going. And from then on, I was hooked. And then when I got back into the UK, I wanted to do leather work for as a business. And I did, selling a lot of stuff on Etsy and my own website and that kind of thing. But I also made a little bit of money on the side by going to vintage shops and buying stuff on eBay. And I would get vintage work, take it apart, learn how it's done, make a lot of notes, take thousands of photos of each piece at different angles, figure out how it was done. But what I would do is I would refurbish them and put them back together, polish them up, and then sell them for more. So it was kind of like I would buy it, work on it, sell it at a profit. And that was a really good kind of like side income as well, so that I could leave my day job and basically live off leathercraft. And over the years, that's kind of how I figured out a lot of this stuff and how it was done, and a lot of experimentation, probably hundreds, thousands of hours of experimentation and figuring this stuff out, and generally being curious. And I would buy pretty much every possible leathercraft book, especially vintage ones from the 1800s up to modern day, and study them and try and recreate what I was seeing, with a specific kind of interest in traditional English leatherwork. All right, let's try this one. So this was just a fraction lighter. Okay, let's see how that goes. They're doing something similar now with clear sheet adhesive, trim to fit, then heat. I guess it's an alternative to tape. Are you talking about like this stuff? This is like a spiderweb mesh of basically this, which is a glue stick. And you put it between layers, and then you apply heat and it melts and then fuses them together. Or are you talking about something completely different? So let's try this. Sounds like basting tape. I think the one that I just showed you was for fabrics and things like that. I think I bought it and tried it out. I don't think I've ever actually used it on leatherwork, to be honest. It was just kind of experimentation to see if it works. It kind of does, but I don't think there's a whole lot of benefit over like contact adhesives and that kind of thing. Oh, like a sheet. Okay. It's interesting. Hasn't made a whole lot of difference. Adding a few drops of caramel to it. So I'm just doing that so that I don't have to wait 20 minutes for it to cool down. And so that was number 3. It's getting a bit closer. So this one looks too bright. This one looks a little darker. And this one is a closer match. Slightly closer match. Not by a huge amount. Kind of looking at it. I think that's close enough to do like one layer of edge paint and see how that goes. So, I mean, I don't have enough for much more than that. So I'll be kind of getting closer, but I know it's kind of like, I'd say 80% caramel. I'd say about 10 to 15% black and probably 5 to 10% blue. So those are the kind of ratios that I'm working with. So I can kind of jot that down, start with that, and then adjust and just make a larger batch so that I can use it on there. A colleague of mine was using it on bag linings. Yeah. Like this stuff. It's on like a grease-proof paper. And you can see this is the kind of like a fabric glue. So it looks like fabric and you glue it on. You basically cut a piece out, place it down, iron over the greaseproof paper, take the greaseproof paper and put your other, I guess, leather or fabric or whatever you want over the top, heat that with an iron, and then the two fuse together. I think I bought a massive sheet of this once. I have used it for a glue-in lining before. It's EVA based, exactly the same as hot melt glue. It's ethylene vinyl acetate. Basically thermoplastic, kind of thermo rubber, whatever. I picked up something like that from Hobby Lobby. It's often used for fabric patch applications. I got a block from Al Stolman. It was about a book from Al Stolman. It was about bag making volume 1. I think, and it gives so many pointers on how to make the gussets and the best ways to secure buckles without compromising the leather. Yeah, he kind of took Western leatherwork into a more of a technical side of things. I think he was really ahead of his time. I think, I can't remember, is it volume 2 or volume 3 is just like, it's like the best one. It's one of them is like far superior. I've seen one. I think it's okay. I think it's 3. I think it's volume 3 that's the best one. But it depends what you want. I think it was more into like trunks and cases and stuff like that. Most of the things are common sense, but it was very funny to see how many brands fumble this in their designs. Yeah. Adam says, hi Phil, I was in your neck of the woods yesterday. As I went to pick up my new Juki cylinder arm sewing machine. Oh, cool. Juki, they're Japanese, aren't they? Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put one layer down and see what this looks like, because you can kind of match it to the surface of the leather like what I've done, but sometimes when you put it on the leather edge, just because of the way the light hits it and various other variables that are hard to quantify, it doesn't quite look right, if you know what I mean. I have done it before where it's so closely matched to the leather surface that it's almost invisible, except in the light it shines a little differently. Put it on the leather edge and you're thinking, you know what, a shade darker would just make that pop, because maybe, you know, this isn't inside the bag, it's darker because the light doesn't hit it the same way. And if you want to color match it perfectly, if it's on the edge, it catches more light and it looks brighter, even though it's not. But sometimes, just sometimes, color matching perfect isn't perfect. So I'm just going to experiment, see what we've got here. And as long as I put some cling film, I guess you guys, some of you would call it saran wrap, over the top of that, I can make up a batch and with all the measured amounts, and I can get it as close to this as possible because I can literally see it in liquid form. I can work from there. So and I'm just going to do the top edges. I'm not going to do the rest of it because I still need to just sand some of these edges down a little bit more, especially in the corners where that leather is folded in. It kind of sticks out a little bit more because it's under compression. So I need to finish that off with some sandpaper. So I'm just going to put a layer on. This should dry quite fast because as the leather absorbs it, absorbs the moisture quite nicely. Not too thin, but not too thick. It's likely going to get sanded off, so it doesn't really matter. I think on this one, because it's chrome tan leather edge, it needs to be squeezed in and compressed a little bit more because chrome tan can open out because it's very soft and spongy. So what I like to do sometimes is get some acrylic Resolene on a sponge, run it round, and then chase that up with some edging pliers to compress the leather in. And then when the Resolene dries, the edges, you know, sometimes 20-30% thinner, which is always a little bit nicer, and just stabilizes that edge so it doesn't spread out if I'm doing a bit of sanding and I go too far back past the paint into the leather. It kind of stabilizes that edge. So right now it's a bit lighter because it's the first layer, so it's going to look crap, but you can kind of see it's catching the light, so it's looking lighter, but it's still wet, so it will darken very slightly. Well, the others have to match that, but if this is in the shade, it looks much darker when the leather is inside the bag, making the outside edge look brighter. When I bring it out, it's not so different. Okay, it will darken slightly as it dries, but you get the idea of what I'm trying to explain there. Sometimes perfect isn't necessarily perfect. I might take that a shade darker to match the inside of the bag as it's seen from the outside. I see many leather YouTubers that do not use primer before edge painting. Sorry, crap, my back there. Do you think edge primer is important in your experience? No, I do not. I have tried with and I've tried without, and more of the time, it's better without. It has more adhesion, less peeling. I did a post on it on my forum years ago now, actually, a few years ago, where I was talking about trying it with and without primer, and I was doing peel tests. So I'd build up like 10 layers, so there's more mass that I can pull on. And with the primers, I'd be able to peel them off with resistance, but be able to peel them off, and there's no leather that comes up with it. And without, it was thick enough to peel off, but I would often break as I'm peeling it. And leather would come up with the paint, just paint, then leather, no primer. And apparently one of my students contacted Uniters and was talking about, are we doing something wrong? And they said, yeah, basically what you want to do is put the primer on, and it doesn't explain this on the bottle, put the primer on, and then get the edge paint on before the primer dries. That way they can kind of chemically intermix and bond with each other. And supposedly the primer bonds better to leather than the paint does, and then they bond to each other even stronger, and then you've got some kind of super edge prep. However, in practice, very few leathers will benefit from that. It would have to be a very oiled leather, very waxy leather that's resisting edge paint. And sometimes all you have to do is just take a sponge and some alcohol and just run it round the edge a few times, just kind of like degrease the initial fibers, and you'll get an incredible bond. Another way of doing it is using PVA glue and put that down, and just before it dries, put the paint on. You kind of get the same thing. PVA is used for primers all the time. And in fact, the consistency of the Uniters primer is, some of them is quite similar to PVA. So I wonder if there's a, anyway, but no, I've tried it with, tried it without, and most leathers, even waxy bridle leathers, will take adhesion directly from the paint better than the primer. I don't know. I have a theory that there might be some leathers where it works better to prime it, but it's another product that people need to buy. Do you know what I mean? It's something else that they can come out with. There's even products that would like edge prep before the primer, before the paint kind of thing. Like there's a company, they need to make money. They need to have products. You can't just have paint and then that's it for edges. The more products they can make for that, and then convincing everyone that they need them in order to do that, gets people, buying more stuff, using more stuff. It makes sense. It's how businesses survive, right? But do we need them? I don't know. I haven't come across leather that needs it. I don't have issues with cracking. I don't have issues with peeling, even on flexible parts. And I think that is just correct usage of the paint. I mean, an easy way to get the paint in is to agitate the first layer so it gets pushed into the leather grain itself, rather than just place it on. Like move it backwards and forwards, almost scrubbing it into the grain, and then get your second layer on, and away you go. It's going to be very difficult for that to come off. Yes, Uniters. You could try a drop of burnt sienna. It's very specific. I hope this finds you well. Thank you for doing these videos, sharing the knowledge, etc. All much appreciated. Thank you very much. I tend to mix my own paints from the basics. So I'll have a white, a black, and then blue, yellow, red. Sometimes caramel, because that tends to it's easier just to start with that for tan leathers, which are quite common for me. Another one that I buy is brown, like a dark brown, usually on the darker brown, so that I can lighten it up if necessary. because brown is a hard one to get a nice shade of brown. You tend to kind of mix the colors that's supposed to make brown and end up with mud, and it can be really complicated. So I just buy brown, and many times that color just works with the darker browns, and I might either add a touch of black or a touch of white to lighten or darken it. But I tend to get like the primary colors, the difficult to make ones, and then a black and a white, and then make those. Otherwise you end up with and I always buy the small bottles so that I can open a fresh one more continuously, and the rest are sealed. I find that if I buy something that's a very specific, like I don't know, like a turquoise or something, how often am I going to use that? So I prefer just making them myself. So let's give that a bit of a forced dry. I don't know if anyone's seen the post I did on Instagram and YouTube a while back, where I showed you how I get rid of bubbles from edge paint. So if ever you've forgotten to mix it the day before and shake it up for the next day, if you shake up edge paint to mix it properly, you end up with loads of bubbles. It doesn't mean you can't use it. It just means you've got to wait several hours. But there was a hack where you just quickly put a lighter across the top, and the bubbles expand with the heat momentarily, and they pop to the surface. Now this actually does much the same. As I just put it over there, they all suddenly popped. So that's a little bit better. It's got a bit more of a matte finish now. Actually looks much closer in real life than it does on the camera, I think, because it's just catching the light maybe slightly differently. I don't know. You get the idea. There you go. That's a bit more accurate. So it's pretty close. Another thing that I'm going to be doing is stabilizing that edge. Because what happens is chrome tans tend to spread out, as I mentioned before, and it's squeezed some edge paint out, but you can kind of see-ish that this area here is thinner than this area here as I've pressed it in. And if you stabilize the edge with a little bit of acrylic Resolene and then go around and squeeze it in, the Resolene dries in the compressed edge and shrinks it. So I'll do that now, actually. This layer of edge paint can do the job of that just fine. And if ever you're trying to neaten up an edge of chrome tan where it's squished in, sometimes stabilizing that soft leather makes it easier to cut off, or if you're using a Dremel to sand off as well. So let's get ourselves what do we need? We need a sponge. And there's one. Typically, how many layers of edge paint would you place down? It really depends on the finish that I'm looking for, the design, thickness of the leather. So many variables that there isn't a recommended amount. This might take 3 layers, it might take 5 layers, it might take more layers because I'm not happy with the color. So I would I would always say the rule of thumb is as many layers as it takes to get the result that you're looking for, as long as it doesn't take you 9 layers to get the edge that you're looking for. Because the essential thing is every layer that you put down, after you've sanded it, it should look so level that you could just do no more, if you know what I mean. So when you put your first layer down, sand it back level. Second layer goes on, sand it back level. You might want to be looking for a bit more of a domed effect. So it might take more layers to do that. But what you want to avoid doing, which might be a better way of explaining it, is let's say you've put your third layer down you've sanded it back, but there's some dips in there, there's some high spots, there's some valleys, there's a ridge down the center, and then you're going to put your fourth layer on top of that. Well, the fourth layer is just going to mirror the third layer. So you always want to make sure, if you need 4 layers, the third layer was perfect, put the fourth layer on, you want another layer on there, sand it down, make sure it's completely level before putting the next one on. So that's my recommendation. And you tend to will tend to have less layers necessary in order to do that. Is if you start getting frustrated and you think, oh, it's not looking right, another layer will fix that. It's not usually more layers are necessary. It usually comes down to you need to spend more time finishing each layer so it's ready for the next layer. Because the next layer will usually mirror the previous layer. So acrylic resin, I use this stuff all the time. It's great. So many things. I think it was originally designed just for finishing burnished edges or similar, but it's a really good tool for stabilizing leather. Yeah, it's very flexible. I have a little bit of glue there that's resisting the absorption of the resin, so I'm just disrupting that a little bit. Dremel, I'm so lazy. Oh yeah, I mean these were cuts together, so mostly it's level. But no, I use Dremel all the time. I probably use the Dremel with the sanding drum just for these internal corners where the leather's compressed and pushed out a little bit. But it's very difficult when it's not stabilized to do that, which is one of the reasons I'm doing this. I might just use a blade if it works. If not, just touch that lightly with a fine grit sanding drum and it should do the job. It should do the trick. I'm using a good amount. I just don't want it just to sit on the surface. I want it to soak in and stabilize. And get a good amount in those corners. So it's stabilized, a good 1 to 2 millimeters inside the leather. But it doesn't really stiffen it up too much. Now, if you absolutely have to try and burnish chrome tan, stabilizing the edge first is often recommended. And you can't really burnish it properly, but you can use super fine grits of sandpaper and keep it stabilized. And then finish off with a little wax at the end. And you'll get something that kind of looks like a stabilized edge. I'm just going to rinse this under the tap so that I can reuse it at a later date if needs be. Excuse me while I disappear for a second. That's where the gimp lives in there, by the way. He's sleeping at the moment. Any tips on getting those awful dips taken away? It's just a matter of sand. Oh, right, yeah. It's just a matter of sanding. Edge painting is something I don't do much of. I often turn edges, but right now I have a project with 3 layers. I I can explain it, yeah. You just keep sanding until it's gone, even if in parts you go back to the leather again. It just means you're going to need some more layers. The best thing that I can recommend is go back. It's probably in the last 6 months that I've done it, but time flies so quickly these days. If you go back and look at one of my blogs, I actually take pictures in the light of an edge that's kind of rough and needs finishing, an edge that's looking better, an edge that's almost there, but there's a few little valleys, and then one that's completely ready for the next layer of paint. And I take pictures of each stage so that you can see what it looks like. And if you're seeing in the light any kind of like any shiny spots that haven't got matte finished from the sanding process, it just means you need to keep going a little bit more. It's a matter of practice, like you say. It's not something you do very often. It's you can understand it to a certain degree, but you need to kind of have a little bit of experience with it. So it might mean getting a piece of leather and then cutting a random shape with some straight pieces, some internal curves, some external curves, and then edge paint that to a perfect finish. And then you can cut the exterior off, and then, you know, it'll be a bit smaller, but then you can practice again. That's what I used to do back in the beginning. I would take, you know, an internal 90-degree corner, external 90-degree corner, internal curve, external curve, big curve, small curve, and practice on that. Yeah, it wasted a lot of leather, but I kind of learnt through experience of how to do this. So it's, you know, I can explain it to a certain point and you can read the blog, but it does, like anything else, really needs some practice. And I'm not looking forward to it. The Resolene edge tip I haven't tried, talking of which, before it dries completely. Let's take a measurement of a before and afterwards without compressing too much. So let's take a measurement, and oops, no, that does compress too much. We're looking at 3.9. Go on the same spot. Oops. 3.3, so 0.6 millimeters thinner on the edge, which is not insignificant. And now when I put my first layer of edge paint on, it will fuse to that thinner layer and then support it, and it will maintain it. And you don't have to use edging pliers like this. If you can get to the edge, which would be difficult on this design, you can just place it down and give it a light tap with a polished hammer. Watered down PVA glue is another one. So if you don't have acrylic Resolene, watered down PVA is just as good. PVA glue being like Elmer's glue and that kind of thing. Not wood glue, because that doesn't have the flexibility. It's a PVA derivative, yes, but it has additives that make it more brittle for work with wood. And you want to leave a few minutes once you've put the Resolene or whatever stabilizing agent that you're using. Once you've put that down, don't let it dry completely, but you want it to start stiffening up just a little bit and then start squeezing it in, and it will hold that thinner edge better. Still working on that amethyst gaiter. Nice. Well, send me a message with some images at some point, or if you make it, like tag me in it or something. Cheers, Phil. Will do. No worries. Hi, Phil. Says Robbie. Hello. Practice, practice, practice. If you think you've reached the top, practice 3 times more. Yeah. Sidetrack happens to me all the time. More coffee helps. Okay, so I'm going to leave that to stabilize, for a good half an hour, or maybe a little bit more, because I did put quite a bit down. And then I can start the edge prep, but I will be filming that, so I won't be doing it live. So I just wanted to jump on today and show you guys, the process that I use to get a close match to leather, and the trick that I use. Don't forget that there is a blog on this subject on leathercraftmasterclass.com, exactly about color matching, with a link to a free website that actually you put in the color that you want or select it manually, and it shows you the ratios that you can use, so it can speed up the process, especially if you have little medical syringes that you can use to extract leather edge paint from these pots. But anyway, I'll probably be doing some more lives. I've got the straps to make so that it will look a little bit more like its prototype. And the idea of this is I'll be using the same color for the straps of this leather, but I will be finishing the edges in this just to make the straps pop a little bit more, to give that more of a basket weave look, so it's not perfectly camouflaged. Gives it a little bit of a frame, which is one of the reasons that I'm doing this leather edge paint on here as well. Thank you for your time. Awesome knowledge. You're very welcome. Phil, you're on Insta. Yes, I am, at Leathercraft Masterclass on Instagram as well. That's where I started. The goal of edge painting to get perfectly smooth finish, as thin as possible or as little girth acceptable. I'll finish on this. The idea of leather edge paint is obviously to finish off the edges, to seal them. How thick or thin you go depends on your design. Usually you don't want to have just like one layer just to dye the edge, like an edge stain, which is not like an edge dye. An edge stain is usually an adhesive and a pigment. That can tend to wear through pretty easily. Like sometimes when you put your first layer on, you'll sand it to get it nice and smooth, and you'll notice that you're starting to, in certain areas, expose leather, especially on the edges of things that stick out, the more prominent, that get more surface wear. That will also happen with time to whatever it is that you're making. So if I just put one layer of leather edge paint on here and then did nothing, let's just say that provided a nice finish, which usually it won't. The edges and areas of high wear will wear through, and underneath will be tan leather, and it won't look very nice. 2 layers, you've doubled the resistance to wear, and that might be enough for something small, for something that doesn't get a lot of wear and tear in certain areas that don't get rubbed very often. So it depends on your design. Once you start getting too thick, areas that flex will start to crack, especially where the leather compresses at a different rate to the leather edge paint that sits on top of it. And you could get cracking, you could get ugly folds that form in there. And that tends to happen where people use too thick a leather edge, and for something that folds like a rustic bifold wallet or something with a 3mm veg tan, and then they leather edge paint that, and then they edge paint it flat and then fold it, and the results are pretty often either ugly or disastrous. So it really depends on how much it needs to flex or how much wear it is, but as with many things in leathercraft, it's often a compromise between the two. So that is the truth. So a little bit of thickness to it is good because it helps with wear resistance. Too much thickness often gives negative results. We'll send a photo when I finish. Excellent. Well done, guys. Thanks for the conversation and sticking around and watching me. As always, I will see you in the next live. And don't forget, there's a free hand stitching tutorial on leathercraftmasterclass.com. There's a pop-up, enter your email address, and I will send you the video immediately. Cheers, guys, and I will see you in the next live. Stay tuned.